The number one theory when it comes to One for All is what? If All Might never met Deku, or if he just never gave him the quirk, who would be the best candidate for One for All? With the story implying that any person who wields the power of One for All will eventually die, many people would say that this is a bad faith conversation, but I would beg to differ. Shinomori dying of old age is not at all evidence for One for All not being able to be transferred to other quirk users. Listen to me when I say this. I believe that One for All can be transferred to other heroes with quirks, and there are 3 characters who, if they had One for All, would not die. And you may not believe me unless you have some context. So I'm gonna wait to reveal them, and I want to tell you about the One for All quirk. The One for All quirk was a quirk that was never supposed to exist. A long time ago, before quirks began to manifest all around the world, a homeless prostitute with twins was impregnated and was due to have twins. The eldest had the ability to take and give quirks, and the youngest had the ability to transfer their quirk to others. Because their mother died giving birth, these 2 kids were off to fend for themselves. As they grew older, the eldest child began to use his abilities to benefit himself, where if anyone would do anything that he did not like or did not want, he would use his meta ability to take them out or take their meta ability away. So the eldest son named himself Shigaraki and named his quirk All for One. And he also named his younger brother Yoichi, which represents the first possession that he was given in this life. From a young age to young adulthood, All for One continued to do malicious acts of service in his own benefit, and Yoichi will often try to steer him into a different direction, a direction in which he uses his power for good. But All for One never listened and always tried to get Yoichi to be a part of his team, to be on his side. However, the main issue was there was no sign from All for One that his younger brother had a quirk. In fact, he actually believed that when they were born and All for One was absorbing all the nutrients of his mother and his younger brother, that he may have taken the ability that his brother was originally supposed to have. Fast forward to adulthood, and All for One's reign of terror has exploited all of Japan. All for One was still offering a seat by his side from his younger brother Yoichi, but Yoichi would always deny him every single time, claiming that what he's doing to people is manipulative and evil and that he should be using his power for good. Yoichi told All for One that he would never be supportive of who he is and what he does, and that made All for One even more upset. He figured that maybe the reason his younger brother was so against him was because he never had power and ability to fend for himself. So All for One made it an effort to find an ability that would not only allow Yoichi to have power, but also to grow that power over a sustained period of time. During this period of time, All for One was the legitimate demon lord. He was the most powerful man with the most influence and the most destructible quirk in all of Japan. And there were many vigilante groups that were created specifically to taking down All for One. One such group had 2 special individuals within it, Tushitsugu Kudo and Bruce Lee. When All for One was away, they planned on raiding his quarters, and that is where they found a locked up Yoichi Shigaraki, looking completely helpless and malnourished. Even though they knew that this was the brother of All for One, Kudo decided to reach out his hand and save Yoichi. When All for One found this out, he ended up tracking them down and chasing them to get his brother back. But in his effort to get his brother back, he ended up killing Yoichi, and the thought that he killed his brother stunned him so much that it allowed the other vigilantes, namely Kudo and Lee, to get away. Later on that day, while holding the remaining hand from his younger brother, All for One realized that he didn't feel a quirk whenever he killed his younger brother. At this point in time, he is so proficient at using his quirk that any person he touches, he would notice whether they have a quirk factor or not. And his little brother didn't have a quirk factor. And in that same exact time, Lee and Kudo did experiments because Kudo felt something different about his body. And it turned out that Yoichi had an original quirk, and that quirk transferred, but more importantly, the will of Yoichi transferred to Kudo. And this did 2 things. It started the crystalline network of will, whose goal was to take down All for One, and it started a journey of All for One to get his brother back. And this led to All for One tracking down Kudo and killing him. But he must have known somehow that All for One was going to track him down and kill him. So he transferred the quirk to the 3rd user of One for All, Bruce Lee. And in a similar fashion to his predecessor, All for One tracked down Bruce Lee to kill him. Now All for One tracked down and killed every single user of One for All. besides 3. All Might, who put a stop to him, Deku, who defeated him, and the 4th user of One for All, Shinomori, who ran away from him. Shinomori knew that he was unable to defeat All for One, so his plan was simple: to go all the way to an undisclosed, unlocatable location. And from there, his sole goal was to cultivate the power within One for All to as high as he possibly could. And he had no idea what this would create, but eventually he would find out that the stresses within One for All going up against the quirk that he already had, the power was so strong that it began to stress him out physically, making him die of old age. When this was originally shown in My Hero Academia, it seemingly debunked the idea that One for All can be transferred to anyone without a quirk. And I genuinely think that people only believe that because the next statement afterwards was telling Deku that he will be the last user of One for All. But I'm here to tell you that not only do those two things not go together, Shinomori dying of old age is not at all evidence for One for All not being able to be transferred to other quirk users. And I can undeniably prove this, but first you need to understand a little bit about quirk factors. A quirk factor is the specific genetic and physical traits that composes your quirk. To make it less complicated, let's look at Bakugo, for example. Bakugo has a combination of his mother's nitroglycerin skin and his father's acid sweat, but his quirk factor is specifically in the palms of his hands, but nowhere else on his body are quirk factors present. Not until he has a quirk awakening, in which now his entire body is physically and genetically altered in order for the quirk to exist. Every person has a different type of quirk, and therefore every person has a different type of quirk factor. We actually found out that quirk factor actually copies a piece of your conscience or your soul within it. In other words, when you combine two quirks together, you're ultimately combining two conscience together. And based on evidence in My Hero Academia, there's only two things that can happen when two consciousness comes together. Number one is that they join together well. And number two, they rebel. Spinner in the final war of My Hero Academia. Every human that was created before the Nomu. And All for One is another example of the quirks rebelling within his quirk. But now wait, One for All is a quirk that is made up of two quirks, but it didn't rebel. All for One is a quirk where he can steal quirks and they don't rebel until they did. Lady Nagant was given a quirk by All for One, and those two quirks meshed well together. The only reason why it exploded was because All for One placed something within the quirk that would detonate if she decided to go a different route. How can this be? How can any of this make sense? What can be the thing that would determine whether two quirks mesh well together or whether they reject each other? It's the will of the user. It's the will of the user compared to the will of the other quirk. That's the reason. That's the reason Shinomori couldn't control One for All. That's the reason Star and Stripe was able to rebel against All for One. That's the reason Lady Nagant's quirk exploded. And that's the reason All for One felt confident in being able to steal One for All. The entire plan of All for One stealing One for All was predicated on one thing: having a stronger will than all the users of One for All combined, so that they may submit to whatever it is that his will says. But every time he's always tried to take the quirk, they've always rebelled. He's never had enough power. So what did he decide to do? He decided to manufacture a person who can have the will to take over and overthrow the One for All quirk. If he was successful, then the One for All quirk would be under him, but he didn't have enough will. This is further proven when Shigaraki stole the quirk New Order. Right before Shigaraki stole Star and Stripe's quirk, Star gave a rule for her consciousness, which was her quirk factor that was inside of All for One, which says that her quirk will rebel against all other quirks. And we get to see inside of All for One Vest's world, Star and Stripe's consciousness, her will, fighting against all the quirks inside of All for One and All for One himself. And finally, the perfect example, Lady Nagant, where in her fight against Deku, she was unwavering 99.9% of the time. The moment that her will slipped was the moment that the quirk that she had within her overtook her and exploded. The same thing was true for Shigaraki in the final war. It all points to the strength of your will. Hikage Shinomori's will is the weakest of every single user of One for All. How strong is your will if the only thing you do when you receive this power is run away because you know you're incapable of beating this person and trying to strengthen your quirk? Your will is not that strong, which means that the power of One for All will be stronger than your own conscience, and thus he was unable to wield the quirk because the quirk was ultimately wielding him. I believe that One for All can be transferred to other heroes with quirks, under the caveat that they have immensely strong will. Similar to the will of Star and Stripe, similar to the will of the quirk that All for One gave to Lady Nagant, similar to the will of Shigaraki preventing All for One from taking it and then losing his body to All for One as well. And now I want to speak on 3 characters whom I already know would have One for All and completely take it to a different level. The first is the #1 hero in all of Japan, Lemillion. Not only would he be able to have the will to sustain One for All, he would master One for All so much faster than anybody has been able to master it. And with his quirk permeation, he quite literally would be the most invincible hero in the history of the world. But he wouldn't be the strongest, because the second person that I believe can wield One for All is the strongest hero in the world currently. That's Shoto Todoroki. With 10 plus years of mastering Phosphor, having the hottest firepower in the entire world, having likely the coldest ice power in the entire world, and then adding the powers of One for All on top of that, Shoto will be unequivocally the most destructible hero in the entire world. And we're not even going to talk about adding Fa Jin to a Flash Fire Fist Prominence Burn Phosphor. That's just insane! And the third person who will be perfect for One for All, because he already had it, is Great Explosion Murder God Dynamite. An awakened Bakugo with 10 plus years of experience that also has One for All would probably be the only hero in the history of the world that can quite literally save anyone. I'm thinking about the sheer speed he would have, on top of having Gear Shift, on top of having Fa Jin. I don't think we can grasp just how much distance Bakugo could travel in a split second if he had One for All. But until next time, make sure you stand up and win your zone every single day.